Live.
Okay, I'm Don Rand, Chairman of the Fire Station Building Committee, and this is an open meeting of the Fire Station Building Committee, and it's being conducted remotely pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, signed into law on March 29th, 2023. All members of the Fire Station Building Committee are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. This act allows the Fire Station Building Committee to meet entirely remotely as long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. Members of the public who wish to view the live stream of this meeting may do so by going to Northborough Remote Meetings on YouTube via the link listed on the agenda. Ensuring public access does not mean ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. Chair confirms that the board members and the persons anticipated on the agenda are remotely present or can be heard by the following. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. So I have Tom Reardon.
Here.
Diana Nicholas.
Here.
John Rappa.
Here.
Daniel Brillhart.
Here.
Chief Parenti.
Present.
Mitch Cohen.
I'm here.
And Don Rand is here. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the following.
I don't think
We don't have any
No,
staff, right?
We don't.
Okay. So that brings us to the approval of the minutes from our last meeting. February 14th, 2024. Do I hear a motion?
Madam Chair, a motion to accept the minutes from the February 14th meeting.
And a second?
I'll
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Roll call vote. Tom Reardon,
Abstain. I wasn't present.
Diana Nicholas,
I also abstain because I was not present.
John Rappa,
Aye.
Dan Brillhart,
Aye.
Chief Parenti,
Aye.
Mitch Cohen,
Aye.
and Don Rand, aye. Which brings us to HKT with the design updates.
Okay, I will share my screen if that's okay.
Back to you, Amy.
And okay, can you see?
No.
No, the wrong thing.
Yep.
Yeah,
Hold
please
on.
take the view.
Hold on.
Yeah, you're in presentation mode.
There we go. Can you
Yep.
see it?
Yep,
All
we're all
right.
good.
Good. Okay. There we go. Okay, so we just wanted to talk to you. Our design updates are mostly about permitting activities that we have to prepare for both the ZBA and the Design Review Committee. And then we're going to talk to you about the cost estimate and the schedule. So for the permitting, we do have to go for ZBA variance for a few items, and we're in the midst of putting together that application right now. Our hope is to get the application in by this Friday. We have until I think Monday to get it in, but we're on in a good position to get it in this Friday. There has been some back and forth between our office and the town planner and the building inspector to confirm what we need to get for variance. The building inspector has determined that we do not need a variance for the height for the hose and training tower since it's not a habitable space. So there's some good news there. But we do need a variance for the front yard setback. By zoning, we're supposed to have a 20-foot front yard setback. The forward-most point of the building that we've designed right now is 39 feet from the property line. So we'll be asking for a variance for that. And then signs, both the freestanding and the wall sign by zoning are limited to an area of 32 square feet. And we exceed that in both conditions. So our freestanding sign, it is an LED sign, and we understand that it wasn't approved for municipalities to have an exemption for municipal LED signs in town. So we have to go for the variance for that. So we showed you a design at the last meeting, which the committee approved. We did tweak it a little bit since the last meeting based on some feedback that we got afterwards, which was to get my pointer here, to change the text up here to say Northborough Fire Department. I think we said Northborough Fire before. So that's the only change to the sign since the last time you saw it. And then the sign mounted on the building itself, we have the lettering Northborough Fire Department. The letters are 2 feet tall maximum. We're calling out these maximum dimensions to give ourselves a little bit of wiggle room when we actually specify the actual font of the letter, and based on the font, find out how the letters are going to be fabricated and what the spacing might be on the letters a little bit. So we wanted to sort of come up with the maximum that we think this is going to be. So the 2-foot height was for the maximum for the height, and then the 72-foot-8 maximum is basically the distance from the outer edge of this pier to the outer edge of this pier. So we figured the sign would have enough room to fill that area if we asked for that distance, and gives us just a little bit of a buffer depending on what the final product is. So I don't know if anyone has any questions or comments about the sign before I go on.
I do, Amy.
Yep.
The 32 square feet is the LED and not the Northborough Fire Department banner on top of it?
It's actually both of them
It
have
is.
that
Okay.
limitation. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Amy?
Yep.
Are they including the brickwork as part of this ground sign?
I believe so.
I believe so.
That's
Yeah.
not consistent with the sign bylaw. That's a structural support, the U-shaped brick. That's not part of the sign.
So
Okay.
are you thinking that it's only the topmost piece and
Well,
they
it's
get an
the-
additional 16 square feet for changeable signs? I think hand changeable signs. So, so you're thinking just the top piece, Tom,
I think it's both the LED
and the other
portion
one?
as well as the top is considered sign. The brickwork should not be signage.
Okay. We can clarify that with the building inspector and adjust the application accordingly.
We have to go for the LED anyhow,
Right.
but the size good.
Okay. Okay. Since a couple of you weren't at the meeting last time, we just wanted to show the updated site plan and clarify a couple of things. So the 39 feet that I just talked about is this distance right here from this corner of the building to the property line, just to let you know that. And I don't know if those of you who weren't at the last meeting, if you had a chance to watch the video of the meeting, but we did present the committee with this updated site plan where we moved the fire department parking to the back of the building. We had a meeting with PAR to coordinate and talk about some different site features, and this was just sort of a win-win when we started talking through it. It allowed us to have a little bit more of a green area along the west side between the parking and the retaining wall along here that allowed for some spacing for lights and for EV charging and for snow storage. And then along the east side, it allows for some plantings and it allows for snow storage. It also allowed them to cut the retaining wall back a little bit here because they can grade naturally with a little bit more of a buffer in this area. We were also able to improve the sidewalk running along the east wall of the building, giving that a little bit more room. So it really seemed to benefit the whole project, as well as getting the parking behind the building where it was a little more screened from view off of West Main Street. And we still have the transformer located over here on the west side of the building, and then the generator and dumpster in the rear of the building back here. So this is the plan that we'll be showing to the design review committee when we meet with them tomorrow, and that we'll be putting in the zoning application. The retaining walls, we also presented at the last meeting, and I just wanted to go through them to show you what we're going to be presenting to design review tomorrow. This is the straight wall, which is what we've been looking at, although it's been adjusted for the parking change back here in the back of the building. This is what when we get to the cost estimate portion of this, the base estimate is based on a straight retaining wall like this. And then we've got alternates for a couple of the options that we're going to look at. The straight wall it's not really totally straight here. It does set back about 2'10" from the base to the top of the wall at the high point of the wall back in this corner. And then the overall height is the 30 feet as we've been talking about. We did some sections through these wall options to help everybody understand what they might look like. This was something that the design review committee had asked us to do to get a better understanding. So when we presented, I think we presented 4 or 5 options to the committee last time we met, and we narrowed it down to 3 different options for further exploration. The first was actually this batter wall option. So all of the options that we're looking at, the walls on the east and west sides of the site have to be straight walls. There's not enough room between the wall and the property line to batter them or terrace them in any way. So those are always going to be straight walls. The difference happens back along the south wall for the site. In this scheme, we're looking at a battered wall, and let me get my, here, you can see the section right here. The section shows that this wall steps back a little bit further, so it's a little bit more gradual. And these sections give you an idea of what that does on the site. So this first section, see if I can get both of these in my image here. So this section is at the high point of the wall. So it's the section cut right here. And you can see the scale of a car and a person in comparison to the wall. So in this battered wall, because the wall steps back a little more as it increases in height, by the time you get to the top of it, the grades are starting to increase going up the hill. So the overall height is a little bit higher than it is with the straight wall option. But it's comparable, it's close. This section here is cut actually right over here. It's cut off of my screen, but it's at the low point of the south wall. And you can see there's a car parked there. The site is about 18 feet where this section is cut and continues to go down into the corner where it's about 14 feet high. And then it continues to slope down along the east side of the property. And then looking here, let me actually, before I do that, the next 2 sections I'm going to show you is one cut right through the middle of the building in each direction. So cutting through the building from north to south here. So the street is out here, the hill is up here. You can get a sense of the retaining wall. The grade is at about 305 at that point and at 332 at the top of the wall. And then this is cutting through the building, looking back at the retaining wall. You can get a sense of how the retaining wall slopes down from one side of the site to the other. So that's the batter wall option. The next one that we discussed looking at a little bit more is a combination of a batter and a terrace wall. So in this case, we have one terrace located right here, and then the rest of the south wall is battered. So looking at the section here, if I blow it up, we have the one terrace where we could have ornamental trees, shrubs, low plants, and then the wall continues up. And looking at the sections, the same sections we looked at before, you get a sense of that terrace here, which is at about 10 feet high in comparison to a person in a car. There's one terrace here with planting, and then we continue up. Again, this is at the low point of the wall. And then cutting through the building at this point, we're beyond where the terrace happens and we're back to a batter wall at this location. You can see the terrace right here in the distance beyond. And then you can see the terrace here in this elevation. This option was something that was developed after we sent the documents to the cost estimator. So this we don't have a cost for. You know, it's something we should talk about when we get to the cost estimate, that the estimate is done at a point in time and design continues. So this is something that we don't have an option for or a cost for, but we do have for the terrace option here. So this is the terrace option. We've got 2 terraces with planting beds on each of the terraces. You can see in the section here. And those terraces, one of the nice things about the terraces is that there's access into these terraces from grade. We should say that the previous slide, the batter and terrace wall option, there is no access into this terrace from grade back along the back of the site here. There's a wall here connecting the 2 battered walls. So in order to access this for maintenance, you'd have to do it via a ladder coming from the parking lot area. But in the terrace wall option, you can access each of these terraces from grade because of the way the site is graded. And let's see if we go to the sections here.
Sections do not look right.
The sections are not right. Those are not the right sections.
Yeah. That's my fault. I'll find them.
Okay.
Yeah. Keep going, Amy.
Well, I think the next slide moves on to cost.
Okay, give me
So
a minute then. Let's see if
yeah.
I can find
does
them.
anyone have any questions before, while Janet's looking for the,
I have one question, Amy.
Yep.
What is the height difference in the previous one terrace scheme between, you said there's a little wall connecting the upper battered walls. What is that height that prevents connection to Monroe Street?
let's see. I don't know, Mark, if you know that off the top of your head. These are still fairly conceptual. Let's see. So that's at
28?
328, I think that says. And the terrace is at 313 and a half.
Okay.
Amy, I have them up on my screen. Do you want me to tell you where it is? Or how are we going to do this easily? I don't know. I just copied the wrong one and so.
I think I will stop sharing for a second and you can
Okay.
share.
Yeah, okay. And believe me, it's not fancy at this point, but and tell me if you see it. The terraces.
Yep.
Okay. So there's the plans, and this is the terrace, the 2 terraces at the high point, I believe, and these are at the low point. You can see the person. Let me see if I can get this a little bigger for you. You can see the people here, and those terraces are about 12 feet tall, I believe, between them, maybe. And then here's with the building, cross section through the building, and this is what you'd see. So you'd see 2 terraces here and one on the back side on the east side. So is that helpful for everyone to see those correctly? Sorry about that.
Yeah, I noticed that Diana has her hand up. You have a question, Diana?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I know I always ask procurement questions, but so how does this work with the contractor who would be responsible for building the walls? Do they just provide the landscape surface and then the landscape contractor comes in and coordinates that with them?
For the planting in the terrace, you mean? Or
Yeah, I mean, so in other words, the people that are responsible for building the wall, because we've talked about how that's really a separate contractor or a subcontractor, right? How did they engage with this sort of landscape component that is it's between the vertical pieces that they're building and the earth that they're responsible for moving?
yeah, we will have to confirm that, but I think it's just a landscaper that would come in. I think there would be two separate contractors. You'd have the wall
Okay,
contractor, and then you'd have a landscaper doing the planting in the terrace beds.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and Diana, both of them are under the general contractors. You
Right.
know, they're both working for him as it's not a filed
Right.
sub bid at all. It's just a delegated design. So, you know, he's hiring that person to do, so it's up to him to do the coordination of
okay.
how the things, and that's, you know, that's what I'm thinking. But
Right.
yeah, so I'm going to stop sharing here so Amy can go back. I apologize for too many PowerPoints this week. Sorry.
John, I see your hand.
One or two.
Yeah.
Okay.
John, I see your hand.
Chief, yes, a question. Janet and Tom, is this the level of detail that, based on the last design review call, that this is what they would be expecting? In your opinion, Tom?
Well, we talked about they wanted to see a 3D rendering of the building that incorporated plantings.
Right.
And Tom, that will happen once we get it resolved. We've spoken, we're already in the works and planning that, but we're going to wait until something gets picked. The town does
Yep.
not own multiple renderings. I think what we heard was a site, they couldn't understand the section through the site.
Okay.
I think, John, is that what you're asking? You know, they couldn't understand the section through the site, so the walls to them look too flat
Yeah,
or too, you know,
short
they just
answer is
didn't have-
yes.
Yeah.
You know, they asked for a
Yeah.
level of detail, and I'm just asking, like, your opinion, Tom's opinion, does this hit the
Yeah.
mark? Sounds like it does for now.
Yeah,
I
I think this, yeah, schematic design. Yeah, this is fine.
I think they also had asked us to look creatively at how to retain that hill. And so I think that's what we did. You know, we looked at multiple options with PAR for what we could do. So this is in response to that. So, you know, it's one of the challenges that we've had in putting the presentations together for the design review. We've talked about, you know, they want everyone to go in early and often. And when you go in early, you don't have all the answers. And so they're pushing us for more and more and more, which will come, but we're not necessarily there yet. As Janet said, we need to get the approvals for the planting before we do the rendering. So we'll get there.
Just real quick, Amy and Jenna, we spoke at the last meeting about speaking with the owners at 73 West Main. You had asked me to go over and speak with them.
Yes.
So myself and Todd from Colliers and our town administrator, Tim, went and spoke with them, and they were very receptive to the idea. In fact, when I asked about the front wall, their answer was, "What front wall?" And then we went out and looked, and they advised me that that wall was there when they purchased the land. They did not put that there. It was there when they purchased the land. The only wall that they built was the one in the back, but they are interested in speaking with us.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, that's good.
Chief, did you ask him about the sidewalk to nowhere in front of the building?
I did not speak about the sidewalk.
Okay.
I think that sidewalk came up in some of the comments that we got from the design review.
Yeah, something about they like this project to include something. I'm just looking for my paperwork here. I'll find it. Let me see. It says currently the sidewalk along the applicable property frontage does not connect to the sidewalk serving the abutting property 73 to 79 West Main. I would recommend that making that connection or constructing a new sidewalk within the Route 20 right of way from the fire station to the first driveway serving the Hillside Grill. So it's something that the committee is going to have to eventually do. It's not in our scope, certainly, to travel off-site, but whether you even want to do it is something.
Okay. Okay, so this is what we're planning on presenting for the retaining walls at the design review tomorrow. So if no one has any other comments or questions, I think we're ready to move into the cost discussion. If I can get my slide to change. There we go.
Amy, can I ask
Yeah.
a question? Which
Yeah.
one do you all recommend?
That's a loaded question.
That's
Uh,
a
It's
loaded
not a loaded
question.
question. That's what we hired them
Correct.
for.
Yeah.
It's
But-
we should
Hmm.
talk about cost.
Yeah, I mean, Diana,
Okay,
there's
fair
there's
point.
a
No, that's
there
a
is
fair
a
point.
it's a
Talk
fair
about the
point. I mean,
cost.
honestly, I mean, I'm going to be honest about it. I'll say that, the terraces are
Yeah.
gentler and easier in the eye, and more planting possibilities. But there's a cost implication, and they go for
Yeah.
the one thing that Amy didn't talk about a
Oh,
little bit was when we were, if you would go back just to any one of them.
Yeah.
There is concern about Monroe Street and future parking
Sure.
in Monroe and how these would impact. So, we looked at other ones as well originally with PAR, but they went much deeper into the site, and we were very concerned about how it would affect the future parking. All of these would have to be that condition along Monroe and along that wall would have to be designed to be able to withstand a parking condition at the future time. From our civil engineer's point of view, not a big deal, not at all, but it would be another consideration. So that's the one thing. So you can see that in this particular scheme that Amy has up, it's a clear space to Monroe. The other quick thing is, the terrace allows access for cleaning. Now, the landscape architect said, we'll plant these, so at best you'd have to go up once a year, but you would never have to go up potentially. It would be up to you. But even with the walls that are closed off, the terraces that are closed off. So he didn't worry about that, but this would allow you to do more maintenance. All of these will have it's not included in this, but each one of these at every terrace edge, there'll be a fence. So, so people will not be able to fall over any of them. Our kids, kids will be kids and somebody will get onto that side.
Yeah.
No base jumping.
Yeah. So I didn't know if this was ever a sledding hill, but whatever.
I
So
think, one of the other issues too, it's sort of pros and cons, right? There's the cost issue, there's the aesthetic issue, but there is the future parking issue. And in addition to structuring the walls so that it could potentially handle parking up there, there's how far the walls extend back. And it's beyond our scope to really look at what a parking lot might look like in the upper portion of the site. So we don't know what impact this may or may not have on a parking layout in the future. You can just, if you compare where these walls are in relation to the stone wall on the site, that's sort of a good reference point to seeing the difference between the different ones. And I back up so you can see that this doesn't encroach quite as far as the terrace option, but it's pretty close. And then when you get to the straight wall, or this isn't the straight wall, I'm sorry, this is the batter wall. There's a difference in this area here, but there's still not that much difference over in this area. So does that have an impact on a future parking lot or not? We don't really know because we haven't looked at that layout.
Question related to the potential future parking lot and the wall. We've obviously had in the back of our minds for a while as a town of a parking lot there. That was back in the days that we didn't know about a retaining wall being needed, certainly a 30-foot retaining wall being needed for the site. Is there enough land that if we as a town said, forget about the parking lot, do whatever you can to minimize the wall, is there enough land to slope it back in a way that you would need far less of a wall or no wall at all? Conceptually.
No, you would need a wall of some sort. The grades
Yeah.
are rising pretty quickly there. Yeah.
yeah,
That's what I thought the answer would be, but I wanted to ask.
Yeah.
Thank you.
yeah.
Tom,
But
I think-
also, we want to make sure that this potential parking lot off Monroe Street is not related to the fire station, either for employees or visitors. We're not going to try to gain access from this upper portion down to the fire station. This would service the town common or the Assabet Children's Park, and just gives us more parking on Apple Fest days. I think you need to make that clear to design review.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, it would be very difficult to have any sort of accessible pathway between a parking lot up there and the fire station parking lot. The grade change is just so steep. It would be an incredible ramp to try to make that work. And it's not really feasible. Okay. So if there's no other discussion there, we're going to move on to the costs.
Hey, Amy, one last question. At what point in time do we have a better educated view on which of these wall options makes sense and that we're going to go with? After we costed it, or after or design review, or both?
I think both. So we have
I
some
think both.
cost information that we're going to talk to you about tonight. And then we had talked about presenting the options to design review to get their feedback. So I think after that, we need to make a decision because it does affect the planning board submission that PAR is trying to work on and do all of their stormwater calculations and all. So we do need to come to a conclusion soon.
Okay, thanks.
And the cost?
And the cost.
And the cost.
And
yeah.
the cost. Okay, so we're going to talk about the cost along with Tim. So we'll talk a little bit about the hard construction costs. So the hard construction costs are the actual costs that you pay to the general contractor for building the building. And that is what our cost estimator has priced out at this point in time. I think it's really important that we all remember that this is the schematic design level estimate. And so it's based on limited drawings that the cost estimator had from the architectural team, civil, landscape, on the MEP, FP, and structural engineer. We had outline specifications from different disciplines, and we had engineering narratives. At the schematic level, not everything is figured out. Not all the drawings are fully developed. Not all the engineering is completely done. So where information isn't available, we oftentimes write notes to the cost estimator, directing him to make different assumptions based on our knowledge and experience, based on similar projects. Where we don't fill in the blanks for him, he makes assumptions based on what he's seen in the marketplace. And then for all the things that we don't know at this point, there's a design and pricing contingency that's put on the cost estimate. So he adds up everything that he knows from all the documents that we've given him, and then he puts on top of that a 10% contingency that covers all the unknowns, everything that's not in the documents at this point. And hopefully what happens as we move forward in design, that design and pricing contingency percentage drops as there's more in the document. So the overall base number of documented information goes up and the contingency number goes down, and hopefully that hard construction cost number stays level as a result of all of that. So that's what we're doing when we're looking at our construction cost estimate. He took a couple of weeks to do the estimate. He put together a draft. We sent it out to all the engineers, landscape architect. Everyone came back with questions and comments, which we sent off to the estimator to take another look at. If he thought that changes needed to be made, he made them. In some cases, he felt like he had them covered and he didn't make any changes. John, did you have a question?
Yeah, yes. So from your experience with projects of this size, is there always some contingency left when we finally give the stamp of approval on it?
When you mean like at the final CD
Yep.
phase, we're
Yep.
always carrying contingencies. There are different
Got it.
contingencies, which Tim, I think we'll talk about a little bit. We have construction contingencies and owner's contingencies, and we can talk about that in a minute.
Okay, thank you.
I
Yep.
would say, John, that the numbers tend to come together
do.
rather than go away. That's what that's why it's an allowance. That 10% is design. We do more design work and he gets better idea about the costs as the costs
Got it.
move
Okay,
along
thanks.
and they come together. So
Thanks, Janet.
Okay.
And this
Thank you.
10% is pretty standard at this stage of design. As you get into design development and construction documents, you might drop down to 7%.
Right.
And then as you're into midway through construction documents, 5% or 4%. It really just, as more things are defined and the estimator can put a price to something, It's just further developing the design, and so we can therefore reduce the unknown factor, which is that design and pricing contingency.
Thanks, Tim. But
So we did ask the cost estimator to price out a number of alternates. We had 14 different alternate options that we will show you, and then one that we're calling sort of an allowance order of magnitude alternate. We've grouped them in different categories to make it a little bit easier to look at them and analyze them. So we have some sustainable strategies, which are things like adding PVs to the roof. We're required by code to have the roof or an area of the roof be ready, PV ready for solar panels in the future. But we did put a cost to actually providing the solar panels now. Same thing with electric vehicle charging stations. We're required to have 20% of the parking spots to be EV ready, but we put, which is 11 parking spaces in our case, we asked the cost estimator to price out providing 11 charging stations. So those are sort of the sustainable strategies. We also have a series of envelope upgrades that we might need in order to meet the new energy code. As we go into design development, the HVAC engineers are going to be working with us to put together a model to figure out what we need to do to meet the energy code. We sort of have a base design for the amount of insulation and the window types that we hope that we can use in the base cost estimate, but we know from similar projects that that folks are doing that we might need to increase the amount of insulation. We might need to go to triple glazed windows, and those all have cost implications. So we've asked the cost estimator to carry those as alternates right now so that we can see what that impact might be if we find out we have to incorporate those into the project. We also asked him to look at a few different alternate materials to get an idea of what that might cost. The retaining wall options we've talked about. We have 3 of those, the base and then 2 alternates. HVAC system options, the HVAC engineer presented to you all different system options. They're going to be working on the life cycle cost assessment, but they need the upfront installation cost as part of that life cycle cost assessment. So the cost estimator priced out a base system and 2 alternates that they can then use in that analysis. And then the one thing that we did as sort of an order of magnitude was we had a request from the fire department to plan for putting antenna up on the water tank on the neighboring property, or that it's not adjacent, but a nearby property. And that would require a conduit run to go from this property out onto Monroe Street to Gale Street, and then onto that property with the water tank and up the water tank. We don't have a survey for the extent that that conduit would need to run, and we don't have any engineering work on that. So we looked at GIS, we looked at the horizontal distances based on GIS. We know there's a significant grade change. We applied a factor to that horizontal distance to account for what the grade change might be. We looked at Google Earth to figure out the different surfaces that we'd be cutting into, whether it was pavement on the street and there's a driveway on the adjacent property. And we wrote a little narrative for the cost estimator, but without the drawings, he felt like the best he could do at this point was to sort of give a range of costs for what that might be. So that's what we're calling sort of the order of magnitude allowance here. Does anyone have any more questions on hard costs before we move on? Big picture. Okay, Tim, do you want to take this?
Sure. Thanks, Amy. So the other component really that makes up our total project cost are what we'll call the soft costs. And we have basically 3 buckets that we pull those from. These are all the different things that it would not be included in your contract with your construction manager or your GC. And it's those things that go in the building that you use for a program. So furniture, fixtures, and equipment, those furnishings, AV equipment, security equipment, telecom, those items. We also have fees and expenses. So the design fees, all their consultants, your OPM fees, commissioning if you chose to go through and commission the building. Any kind of, we would have a line item, hopefully we don't dig into it, but legal costs. Certainly we would have some utility assessments, And then some costs during construction for material testing during construction. And then we have what contingency for actual construction. So we would have basically a percentage of the project cost that we would carry for those things that come up during construction. There's always something that comes up. And then we have another contingency that we call owner's project contingency, which a lot of times is designed for additional consultants that might be required to be brought on, but it's kind of a separate category we carry that isn't necessarily directly related to any kind of cost of implementing changes to the work. So basically, those costs that Amy went through, that of the hard costs of the construction, the items that they've had estimated by their estimator, and all these soft costs we develop our total project cost. Now, we've pulled together these soft costs based on previous projects, similar projects. We've talked it back and forth with HKT and ourselves, but a lot of these things are in flux based on the different wall types that we're talking about, because a lot of these are percentage based. Some of these contingencies, like I mentioned, are based on a contingency of the construction cost. So depending upon where those hard costs end up, some of these soft costs would adjust as well. Any questions on what's making up our budget before we go into kind of looking back to what the study that you had done in the past and where we are now?
I have one question regarding the commissioning.
Sure.
So if we are very concerned about the building envelope meeting the new energy code, is a third-party testing of the building envelope, including the windows, doors, brick veneer, a recommended soft cost in this case?
I think it actually might be required now. I'd have to double check that. The new energy code, it may be a requirement that we have, but I would definitely recommend it.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, Amy, if you want to go to the next one. So obviously you guys had a study done a number of years ago. Typically, we would do a feasibility study and then roll right into a schematic design and move forward. But due to a number of different issues, the pandemic and the site unsuitable soils or hazardous materials, there was some delay in there. So it's not a nice, clear, easy, linear transition. So the feasibility that was done is really just, hey, can we build this type of building on a particular site, and for an estimated cost, is it feasible? Can we do it? And then once you say, yeah, sure, that seems to work, you move to the next phase and you get into schematic design. So in this case, we went back out for an RFP, brought on HTK and asked them to kind of pick up at that point. So they're kind of starting from scratch at that point. They have some information that they're using as their base of what was done previously, but they're going to do their own homework and review this, and then take it to the next level with actual surveys, actual engineering that wasn't necessarily done in a feasibility study. A feasibility study, again, is kind of quick and dirty, if you will, as opposed to more of an in-depth analysis and design. And that's currently what HKT is working on. So as you're comparing cost estimates from 2019, or at least an estimate that had been done, versus what we're going to be talking about now, you're going to see a big difference. And a majority of that is based on just the escalation that we've hit since the 2019 study was done. We had historic increases in inflation, the pandemic and supply chain, worker shortages, material shortages have really caused a huge problem in the construction industry, not to mention the lead times on some materials. And that hasn't necessarily gone away. It may have leveled off, but it certainly costs aren't going down. And some materials is still at record lead times. So having to order quickly and it just increases the cost. So when we used to take a look at this, I guess in the good old days, we would say it was a pretty consistent 3 to 4% would be our typical escalation that we would use in estimating. But since the pandemic, or since 2019, we've seen things fluctuate between 5 and 15%. So really crazy numbers. And we still haven't gotten back to the 4%. Locally, we're still kind of on that lower range of 8% of what we see going forward. So when we look at the numbers from 2019 and try and compare them to 2024, we really need to make sure that we do that escalation in costs so that we have an apples to apples comparison. Some of the other things that we're going to need in order to do that apples to apples comparison is really take a look at the program that was developed in feasibility, as opposed to what was really done, a thorough programming development that was done by HKT with the fire department, as well as some other costs, going back into the site, the retaining wall. There's a lot of different items that are going to impact the 2019 costs to the 2024 costs. But in looking at it, and looking at the size of the building and doing an analysis, they really do seem to be pretty close to a linear progression based on the escalation alone, along with some of those other factors. So unless you have any questions about kind of that prelude, well, we can jump into what we see as the project costs. All right, Amy, why don't you go to the next one? So as Amy said, there was a construction estimate done. It's a professional estimator. That's what they do. They're not necessarily looking to be a low bidder. They're looking to give their opinion on cost based on what they see in the market every day. So because they do this every day, they can stay in touch with where bids are coming in, where they estimated their previous jobs, and where the numbers actually came in. And then we have the alternates, because the drawings that went out a while ago, and they were based on a moment in time, a snapshot of the design. And we know that we're looking at maybe some different alternatives for walls or different mechanical systems. And so these alternates will provide a range that we would add on or deduct. In this case, it's really all add-ons to the base construction estimate, if you will. So that $30.9 million base estimate with these alternates provides us a range of about $33 to $37.6 million. Then we add in the furniture, fixtures, and equipment. And again, there's a range on that because we really haven't gone through and sat down and really defined what that equipment is, what those furnishings are going to be. But we have a range from $750,000 to $1.35 million. Fees and expenses. Again, there's going to be a range there, but it's a little tighter. It's 5.1 to 6.25. And then our contingency, also a range there of 4.1 to 4.7 million, which brings us up to a total project cost, at least a range for a total project of 43 to 49.9 million. It's a big number, and I'll give you a minute to let it soak in, but any questions about kind of how we've come about putting this together and developing these cost ranges?
One question, and you'll probably get to it on another slide, is you mentioned alternates and the wall variations. Is there the least expensive wall option built into the construction estimate, or no wall?
No, there is a wall built into the base estimate.
Gotcha.
And depending upon which way we go, it could go up a little bit, it could go up a lot more. There's some variations there, as well as mechanical systems.
Yep.
If we were to do a greener option, it might be a higher first cost, so a much higher construction cost, but overall long-term lower cost to operate. So some of those costs explain some of the alternates that we will go into a little bit of the next slide.
Thank you.
So what is the construction cost per square foot right now? Then I don't remember the square
It's
footage
about
exactly.
It's about $1,001 a square foot.
Okay, thank you.
That's the 30.9 number.
Yes, thank you.
And for comparison with the 2019, 18 or 19 feasibility level estimate, that I think was about 18 million, and that's comparable to, is that comparable to either the construction estimate or the total construction?
So I think that 18 was a total project. I actually have it here. So that 18.7 was a total project budget number. It's a little bit hard to compare apples to apples on total project because
Yeah.
their percentage of soft costs to hard costs was very different than what we're carrying. They had some very basic information. They had about an 82% construction cost versus only a 17% soft cost. We're carrying about a 75-25 is what we're showing. So it's a little bit different, but their construction cost was 15.4. And then if you escalate it over the years, you're going to come up to a number based on their square footage. And then if you make that an apples to apples compared to our current square footage based on the programming that was done, you're coming up with just under 30 million to what we were showing as 30.9. So I'm showing it in a calculations based on escalations that were provided by the estimator of a 2024 building based on your $15.4 million study from 2019, costing in 2024 25.5. And then if you adjust it for the size difference between the two buildings, you come up with 29.75 versus our 30.9. So it's pretty close.
And we increased it how much percentage wise?
About it was 26,420 square feet that the estimate in 2019 was done on, and we are at 30,850. So about 4,000 square feet roughly.
Yeah, 12% or so. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's a lot of numbers. I know it gets really confusing, so I wanted to try and make it pretty simple here, but at least be able to speak to the fact that based on the construction numbers that they were using at the time, our construction numbers tie pretty closely to what they had. The soft cost, again, they had a pretty minimal soft cost section. So that's why I didn't do that comparison.
Great. Thank you.
Done?
Do we anticipate discussing any of this level of detail on costs with the design review committee yet?
No, absolutely not. We stick
Thank
to the
you.
building design and the landscape design.
Thank you. That's fine with me.
Yeah.
Second question, really an observation that if anybody brings up the 2019 study, this is more detailed than, and the scope of this project is much more, is different than what was done in 2019. I mean, that should be apparent from the get-go. People say, well, you said it was this much then, and it's $1 billion now. Well, it's different because it's detailed.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. You know, it is different. It's always going to be different from as the design develops and moves on. And honestly, when at bid day, it's going to be different between all your bidders. No one comes up with the same numbers. There's a range.
Right.
And if you think about what the estimate that was done in 2019 was based on, it was based on square foot numbers, very rudimentary, no details, no engineering, no survey of the property. So as you look in and these things are defined, you can put a little better numbers to them. And again, we have this range, and as we move forward through design, this range will get narrower, and we'll be able to define some of these unknowns at this point. But I think it would be a disservice to try and provide a tighter range at this point, because there is still a lot of design
Right.
left to go. Even the big picture items like mechanical systems and retaining walls and site development.
Phrase I
Tim,
learned years
I-
ago. Sorry, Diane.
Go ahead, John. Okay.
Phrase I learned years ago is set the expectation, manage the expectation.
Neil? You have your hand up?
Yeah, Tim, do you know on the 2019 price, if they had taken into account the 10% or 12% contingencies, or that wasn't even included?
No, they did. They had
Okay.
a 10%. They had 10% construction contingency, and then a 5% construction contingency. And then they had another 5% contingency on top of that. So basically a 5% on the construction value and then 5% on the total project value. So it's actually adds up to a little bit more than 10%.
Diana?
Are you going to show the percentage of cost that's related to site? Are you going to give that breakdown?
I don't have anything to show that necessarily. I was looking at what they had for a site cost in 2019.
Right. Yeah.
And I think they had about 1.25 million as their site cost. We're carrying site costs of about 4.3.
Okay. So that's pretty
But that doesn't account for escalation, Tim, right? That 1.4 would have
No,
gone up to
you're correct.
2.2
That
or
1.2,
2.3. It's
yes.
not great, Diana,
Yeah.
but it is different, you know.
But that's also, I mean, this is also, again, going back to the fact that we didn't have an accurate survey. So that cost could not have been anticipated at all at that point.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Thanks.
Yeah, so there's a lot of numbers, a lot of kind of ways to look at it. But I think big picture, I was kind of surprised actually that we were as close as we were, given the fact that the program has obviously changed. The site issues have caused some costs, but we're still pretty close to the number that was presented back in 2019 with escalation and adjustments.
Any other questions?
John,
For Janet, your line items for loose furnishings and program-related equipment. So that's mechanicals, transfer switch, generator, among other things. Yes,
No, that stuff would be in your construction cost.
That's in your construction, yeah.
it is. Okay.
Program-related equipment is really about if there was in the gym space, the treadmills or
Okay.
beds in the dorm area,
Okay.
telecommunication equipment or AV rack and
Kitchen supplies, kitchen equipment.
yeah, rattleware we call it.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, if it's built in, for the most part, that's included in that construction cost estimate. So if we had some built-in shelving and stuff, that wouldn't be furniture necessarily. That would be built in as part of the construction estimate.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else on this?
No, I think then just talking, Amy would take it and Janet would take it to the next level, is talk a little bit more in depth about some of the alternates that they had alluded to earlier.
Okay. Janet?
Amy, I'm here.
Sure.
I mean, she's going to lead this one.
Yeah, so we put together this slide to explain the alternates. As I said, we grouped them into these different categories. So we've color coded them to sort of help you get a sense of the categories that we've got here. So we've got the green alternates, which are the EV ready charging stations, the PV the green roof in a little section of the building. But just stepping back, the numbers that we have here are estimates, and they're just for the hard construction costs. Some of these might also require additional soft costs. Some of them, like the antenna, for example, we would need some additional survey work to nail that down. We would need a little bit of additional engineering work. So it's not really in the scope. So this is just the impact to the hard construction costs that you see here, and they're just approximate based on the level of information we were able to give to the cost estimator right now. So we've got the green options, the energy code upgrades, which are upgrading to triple glazed windows. In some cases, if we go to triple glazing, we have to actually move to curtain wall because the storefront system can't support the triple glazing, adding some additional insulation in the walls. So those are things that we really don't know whether or not we might need yet, but we want to have an idea of what the order of magnitude is so that once we get the model done, we can decide whether or not we need them. Material options, we had them price out the asphalt shingle roof versus standing seam is what we showed in the design. We were showing the folding doors, and we asked the cost estimator to price out going with traditional overhead doors rather than the apparatus bay doors. We were looking at a brick veneer versus a calcium silicate masonry unit product. And we're still trying to find just the right masonry that we want to present to the committee. And so we wanted to have some options there as we're looking for the right aesthetic and to know what the cost implication would be of that. So we had them price that out. And then some of the areas where we have been showing a panel product, there's been talk about metal panel versus cementitious panel. We wanted to have some options for that. The purple ones here are the retaining wall that we talked about. So we have the battered wall in the base number. We have terrace. I'm sorry, we have the straight wall in the base number. We have a price for going to terrace and a price for going to the battered walls. We have the HVAC options that we're working with the life cycle cost assessment. And then we have the antenna. So we can talk about these numbers in more detail, but we group them. You also see these red dashed lines and these blue dashed lines. And these, we were trying to think about what we need decisions on sooner rather than later. And that's what we were highlighting with these. So the red dashed lines are things we really need decisions on tonight or soon thereafter. The blue dashed lines, we probably have a little bit more time to talk about. And then some of these other ones we have more time. The reason the red dashed lines are critical things is that this has to do with permitting. It's information that we either need to get into design review documents or information that we need to get into planning board submission. So for example, the 11 EV ready charging stations. In the base cost estimate, we've carried provisions to make 11 parking spots EV, I'm sorry, this should be actually called EV charging stations rather than EV ready. The base provision is that these parking spaces are EV ready. So there's conduit brought to the parking space, but there's no physical charging station at that parking space. We asked the cost estimator to then price out what it would be if we added 11 charging stations. And so it was about $129,000 for the 11 charging stations. By code, we have to have them EV ready. We don't have to provide the charging stations. We did talk to the town planner about what the town of Northborough requires for EV ready charging and we understand there's nothing written yet, but she advised that we should plan on 6 parking spaces being equipped with charging stations. And we let her know that we were getting a price and that we'd need to talk to the committee about what your thoughts were on that, if that's what you wanted to carry. But that's something we need to incorporate into the documents so that we can respond in these submissions. So we need to know if you want to go with the 6 charging stations, if you want to go with 11 charging stations, or if you want to push back and say it's cost prohibitive at this time, we just want to provide EV ready per code requirements. The retaining wall, we've certainly talked about a lot. We've shown you what we're planning on presenting to design review. As we said, this impacts the planning board submission and the work that PAR is doing right now. So we really do need to get some direction on where we're going to go with the retaining wall. The base cost that we presented again has the straight wall in it. If we go with a batter wall instead of the base wall, it's an additional approximately $297,000 to the project. If we go with the terrace, it's about $612,000 to the project. And we don't have a price for that one terrace. So this is the multiple terraces, the 3 terraces going up. We did show you that option where we have the combination of the batter and the terrace. And this is where I said that came up after we had already presented all these, this cost estimating package to the estimator. So that wasn't something that was actually estimated, but you can imagine the cost probably being somewhere in between these 2 numbers. And then the antenna, as we said, the cost estimator really didn't feel confident given the level of information we had to provide him with narrowing down to a single number. So he gave a range of between $700,000 and $900,000 to bring the conduit to the water tank for an antenna installation up there. And that one we would really need to know so that we could get some additional survey work going and some additional engineering work going, so that we could figure out what would be needed to do that. So those are the decisions that we really need soon. The material options gets into moving on to design development and the detailing that we need to do. Detailing an asphalt shingle roof versus a standing seam single roof is different, and it will have an impact on our work. So that's something we really want to get an answer on soon. It doesn't necessarily need to be tonight, but it does need to be soon. To go with an asphalt shingle roof instead of the standing seam metal, there's a deduct alternate here. So it's less money to do the asphalt shingle than the standing seam. And it's a projected savings about $307,000 to make that change. The overhead doors, we were surprised by this, to be honest, and we did ask the cost estimator about it a couple times. The folding doors we expected were going to be more expensive than the traditional overhead doors with glass in them. And he said, no, not what he's seeing right now. If we delete the folding doors and go to a traditional overhead door, it's an add to the project of $172,000. Tom, I see you have a question.
Amy, I want to know which type of asphalt shingle they were considering. They come in 25-year, 30, 45, lifetime. Typically they last maybe 30 to 40 years, and a standing seam metal might last 100 years.
Right.
So I'm just trying to get a sense of what they were considering for the asphalt.
Yeah, I don't know that we gave him that information at this point. I'd have to go and look at the outline specification and see if that made it into it. Typically we do an architectural shingle, which is a 30, 40 year lifespan, but you're right, there is definitely a different lifespan. So it gets into a life cycle cost and how often you have to replace the roof. A standing seam metal roof is going to last the town longer, and you won't have to replace it as often as you will an asphalt shingle roof. And I think the life that you're quoting is accurate.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Amy, if it's okay with you, let's take the red ones first, and then maybe you can get back to us on the asphalt shingle, since there seems to be questions about that.
Yep. Yeah, as I say, we don't really need to have decisions on these tonight, but the red ones I think we need to talk about.
Okay.
Yep.
The first one would be the charging stations. My opinion is, if the town planner said that we should probably do 6 of them now, that's probably how we should go, but how does everyone else feel?
The state has a grant program for providing these for municipalities. Is the 129 reflective of that or not reflective of that?
No, this is just the construction cost. So any grants or anything would not be included in that.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure whether those grant programs pay for them up front, or we pay for them and then they reimburse.
Probably reimbursement.
Yeah. All right. So we might get that $129,000 back.
Yeah.
What's the split between those EV chargers being on the public parking area versus the staff parking area?
Mark might be able to remember that, but I think there might be one or
Yep.
two in the rear.
Yeah, there's
and
a
two.
yeah, there are two on staff parking, and then there are four for public
Right.
parking.
Okay. And if we went with 11, it would be somewhat of the same ratio, you think?
Probably.
And that's
think-
something, is that something we don't have to decide that now, I assume?
Well, we have to put something into the planning board documents, which is the
Okay.
big focus that
Yep.
we're in this middle of this
Okay.
window of
Yeah,
that to stay on schedule. So, you know,
I mean, my preference is go with the 11. Especially if we can, maybe ask either the town planner or the town administrator just verify that grant program still exists. Be set up for the future.
Okay, any other opinions? John?
Yes. From a financial planning perspective, if we have to put the wiring for 11, we have to commit to that, but I would say, 6 built out stations, let's put a minimum number there to keep these costs down. Not start cutting costs somewhere, and we can't afford the Ferrari all the time.
I agree.
Yeah.
Other opinions?
So if we do that, though-
if they're free, why not get them?
We don't know that yet. It's a no-no.
Right. No, I agree. We should get that answer. If the grant program limits us to, they'll only reimburse for 6, then I agree 6. But I'd rather have the conduits in for all.
But also it doesn't necessarily translate to half the cost or roughly half the cost so it may not be that, it may be a pretty small amount to actually just add the other 5. So I do think, I know you guys need this number, you need the information on what to do here. To what extent are you going to carry alternates in the documents moving forward? Obviously, you don't want to have a lot of them, but
Well, I think on this one, we're going to show that we have conduit going to 11 different spots. And I think showing that you have a minimum of 6 that maybe we're going to carry in our construction number, but we're hoping to be able to get grants, and they would go here, and those locations would be identified. I would think that would be enough for the planning board to sign off on.
Yeah.
yeah,
And then
I
you
would
can
go with
determine-
11 if it's an
Usually they're
alternate.
double-sided chargers that go between a spot or something, so, maybe there's only 6 towers for 12 spots, I don't know, but if certainly if you can pursue grants and get them, whether it's reimbursement, or sometimes it's a specialty contractor that comes in as part of that grant who installs them, then you have your operational cost with a service agreement with the provider and that sort of stuff. It gets complicated, or it can get complicated. But I think as far as the permitting process, that's why we need the decision for the planning board, I guess. So if the intent is to provide some at a minimum, but eventually, hopefully we'd be able to get 11 or 12 at some point to show where they're located. Hopefully it would be enough information for them to approve the plan. And I don't know, Amy or Janet, if that gives you guys enough information.
Yeah, I think at this
Yeah.
point,
yeah, I agree.
that's good. Yeah.
I just looked up the grant. It's still out there. And it's a Mass DEP grant that funds 100% of the hardware and installation costs up to a maximum of $50,000 per street address.
Oh,
So we would likely not be able to cover the full 129 of 11 of these, but $50,000, unless we cheated and say, well, these were originally 2 street addresses and we call the
three
first
street addresses. 3. We actually have 3 street addresses.
Staff
Great,
parking
okay.
Yeah,
versus-
because we have 10 Monroe.
See what you can do.
Show me.
Yeah. So I think then I like Diana's question about, if we can understand the delta between getting the 6 and getting the 11. I don't, I don't know. I have no idea.
I would say from the permitting point of view, let's assume this is going to be an alternate that we put in and it's 11, But we can always modify the actual bid alternate in construction
Mhm.
documents or
Right.
even
Yep.
design development, right?
Yeah.
So it's not like we're gonna be stuck with 11 if we all agree on this right now.
It's good logic.
Right, so just the logic is we give Amy and Janet the direction and Mark to go, let's put 11 on the plan, and that's what'll go forward to the planning board. But if and when push comes to shove, we decide to go back to 6, but have the infrastructure in for 11 as required, that would be okay as well. Is that
Yeah, I
correct?
think ultimately, once we know the difference in price between 6 and 11.
I mean, speaking from putting my fire chief's hat on, I don't want to give up any programmatic area for an extra 5 EV chargers. But if it's, we can look down the road further. If we put 5 in now, we can always cut them later.
I agree.
Amy and Janet?
Amy, could you repeat the final? I've got so many different options written here.
I think,
keep-
I mean, I think what makes sense, I know what you just said, Chief, but I think what makes sense from a document standpoint and from sort of making promises to the planning board is to say that we will do 6 and we will carry an alternate for 5. And then we will, continue to track the price, and that's a pretty easy one to do as a bid alternate if we decide to do it as a bid alternate. But we commit to the 6.
That makes
with,
perfect sense to me. Yeah, I got
okay.
you.
So we're moving some things out of the alternate category into the base documents then at this point. Right? So the 6 will be
Right.
in the base document, and then we
Yes,
can
right.
later do the 5 as an add alternate if we want to.
Right.
Right.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone?
Yeah,
Good. One thing to keep track of is if we can get reimbursement on up to $50,000, we would somehow need to document the cost of those EV chargers, of those, whether it be the 6 or the 11. So we can get the 50,000 of, I assume there are ways of doing that. It's probably a question for Tim.
Yeah, we typically would get a schedule of values from the electrician. These would fall under their scope. And so we can easily pull that out.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so we did that by agreement, so let's go to the retaining wall. There's quite a difference in price. So,
I think this one is very helpful to get input from design review before we make a decision.
But okay, so they're gonna go to design review, and then if design review makes a recommendation and it happens to be, let's say, the terraced one, we're all in agreement then that we're gonna be carrying an extra $612,000 alternate?
I'm not.
I don't think this would be,
It's a
this would not.
recommendation from the design review. There's no authority beyond a recommendation.
Exactly. This is my point.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's why I don't know that needs to go to design review. If we know, I mean, you can look at those designs, but to me, I don't know that it's worth $500,000 to have the terrace.
And I agree with you. They would have to come back with an overwhelming argument.
Right.
For
We
why
need to go
that's
back to the
about that.
chief's point about program. We need to get everything they need in the firehouse as much as possible and
Right.
maximize our alternates to contribute to the life safety issues.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, honestly, the 2 that I would consider is either the base or the battered. The other one that was presented earlier, I'm curious what that number looks like. I don't know if it's going to be tremendously more beneficial or more beautiful than the battered. And I don't know how much more it will cost than that. But based on the 3 options before us, for me, it's either base or batter. But I think I prefer waiting for design review is my take between those. But I think we should eliminate the terraced tonight.
Tom?
It would be helpful to see maybe an image of a battered wall that we might be considering in terms of texture, color, scale of the block. That makes a big difference in how it will read.
Agreed.
Right, when is our next meeting? I mean, we're talking about not
March
making a
6th.
decision, but March 6th is our next
Yeah,
meeting.
right now it's March 6th, but we really need to talk about what we're going to do there. But I mean, if we need to have a Zoom meeting to talk or some meeting, but let's talk schedule in a few minutes. But
You would like an answer
Yeah.
to,
yeah,
I am curious what other people are thinking about the retaining wall.
So I guess just to back up a little bit, our base is a straight wall.
Yep.
That
correct.
Correct.
like with basically, it sets back about 12 to 18 inches over 25 to 30 feet tall.
18 inches
And-
over 30 feet. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
and so the battered wall has a much, well, more of a setback as you go higher.
Mhm.
Correct.
And then we talk about a kind of a hybrid of a battered and with a single terrace. The multiple terraces at $600,000 above base. If there's, we don't necessarily decide which one we want, we can determine that, all right, the terrace is probably out, and it's going to be the battered or or a hybrid, or it sounds like the base is really not desirable. I don't know if at this point everyone could agree on that, and maybe you can cut out the high and low number and work in the middle.
Just to remind everybody, there's always going to be straight walls on the east and west sides, period.
Right.
And so as we're just talking about the southern wall, the rear wall that has what we're talking about for that added cost, so just to keep that in mind for folks, nothing else will change. So
Yeah, and that battered at 300, we'll say, and I'm just picking a number and it's not based on anything, but if it was, say, 450, you're talking, okay, that's between the two, it's $150,000. If you really don't want the straight wall and you don't want the terraced, really, that's what you're really deciding between at this point.
is there any real advantage to the batter wall besides the set going back?
Just the way it looks.
Well, I think you need to consider how much shading is provided, a straight wall versus a battered wall, because you have a high southern slope in the rear of the site. And I suspect the battered wall at a greater angle might allow more sunlight to penetrate to the back of the building in the parking areas, but maybe Mark has done some solar calculations here, but not yet.
And
I don't
hey,
think so.
Amy, could you just go
No, but
back
I
to
think there are
those
some
things
renderings
are-
for just for a second? Just come
Yeah.
back up for just a second because it helps for people to have a visual on these again. So this is the
So this is the straight.
Hmm.
So at the
wall.
high point here, where we have the 30-foot high wall, the wall steps back it's actually about 2 foot 10 inches from the base to the top of the wall. And that's the base cost estimate number. And then this is the batter wall.
Ne-
I'm just thinking for a minute. So the base wall, Janet, has GeoGrid. GeoGrid is required, yes.
required, yes.
GeoGrid is required along the entire wall, which is one of the things that adds to cost here. Where we have the batter wall, we need the GeoGrid on the east and west walls, but we don't need the GeoGrid back here. And
Not
then-
anticipated, right?
Right.
So just so everybody understands, the GeoGrid is something that as you build up the wall, you have say like a 10-foot, 12-foot,
Yeah.
15-foot mat that goes down and it gets interlocked between the blocks and then goes into the soil material about 10 to 15 feet. So when you backfill on top of it, it's helping to hold that wall in place. So what that requires is more excavation in order to build that style of wall. So it's more earthwork, it's just more labor, it's more money.
Will we get some details on the sort of the base construction cost, particular in this one? I'm curious what the cost estimate is of the base wall, the straight wall.
I don't have that in front of me.
Yeah,
Well, go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
Amy.
I was going to say it's sort of buried. It's not so easy to pull those numbers out.
Right.
I'm looking quickly to
We-
see if he has a deduct number, Janet. Let me see.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, obviously we can't deduct it, but it would be helpful to, I think, understand, are we doubling or tripling the cost by, I don't think we are, by the $300,000 option, or are we adding 5% to do
So
that?
I think you're adding, I want to say, and I'd have to really dig in because I may have been in multiple areas, but I thought I saw that the base wall was about $600,000.
Okay.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
But that's before adding any of the general conditions and everything, but yeah, you're right.
John?
Yeah, I just want to remind people that some of the feedback on one or two of the community meetings where we had some of the earlier diagrams, the idea of the specter of a large wall, we got a lot of feedback on in terms of, whoa, that's pretty big. So understanding that the east and west walls are going to be straight and we can't play with them that much. There was a concern of, the magnitude of the look of what's going to be there. Now, mind you, the building's going to block most of that view from the street. Just
The
my
batter wall
observation.
is also approximately 70-degree angle, which is the azimuth of the sun, June 21. So this would allow you to get some sun in the back. As the sun gets lower, and you're going to get more and more shading, especially for the employee parking.
So Tom, your preference would be? The
I
battered-
think straight walls on the side and battered in the rear.
This option right here that we're looking at.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take your recommendation on that. That's what I'd go with.
Yeah, that's my leaning.
I think, you can justify that you really don't see much of that the building is blocking most of that rear retaining wall. And it's really just on that public parking area where you would see would be your biggest opportunity to see it. So
And
I concur
know
with
that
Tom
it's
also.
worth the premium of the cost.
Okay. Captain, where are you?
Captain's there. He's just hiding. He's staying quiet.
I am all for the straight wall. I'm all for the battered wall. I don't think we should look at the terrace wall if it's going to be that much more, because we're already looking at a large price tag for this project.
I agree.
Mhm.
So by agreement, the battered wall?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right, that takes us to the. Oh, the
Dawn,
tower.
I think,
Antenna.
excuse me, Don, I think Neil had his hand up.
Oh, sorry, Neil.
Jeff, you got your hand up?
I did, yeah. I just had a question on, when you're looking from the street side on the public side, you're also gonna have trees in some of that area, correct? So that'll kind of block a little bit more, like along the building,
Yeah.
trees and such, so
That's a
that'll
good-
help.
Sorry, I'm trying to get my pointer here. So yes, there would be some trees in here,
So that'll help
some
block it as well.
plantings.
Okay, thank you. All right, so that by agreement, and it brings us to the antenna on the water tower. I think the chief would like to address that.
Yeah, because it was the chief's idea to do it in the first place. So one of the things it was trying to address was a line of sight issue from our antenna at our dispatch center, which is at the police department, to a potentially a microwave off the top of this tower, which would provide us with some additional capabilities and improve some communications issues we have. However, in no way can I justify a cost of $700,000 to $900,000 to address that issue. And more importantly, myself and the police chief and communication supervisors are already in talks of a long-term plan to improve our communication system throughout the whole community. So I think it would make more sense to put, and I've talked to Amy and Jenna, we talked before, that we already have in the plan brackets to put, for lack of a better word, to put antennas on top of the station. With that in mind, my recommendation would be we go with that. And then in the future, either through a grant process or through the process of developing, expanding, improving our communication system throughout town, maybe then we'll want to say, hey, yes, we do want to invest and we want to do it, but there may be a different way to do it than conduit. I don't know what that is. Maybe it's microwave from one to the other and then to the other. I don't know enough about it. But I think 700 to 900,000 is way too much money for what we're looking at. I would rather go with the alternative of putting it on top of the station. Now I'm gonna throw the deputy. I'm gonna stick this with him real quick to get his opinion on this. I just want to know what he thinks about it as well.
Neil?
Yes, I would concur. You know, we've identified radio issues, but it's a bigger issue than solving it with this tower. So, and the antennas on the top of the building, just if the public's listening, it's not like it's going to be a big radio tower on top of the building. It's a couple of antennas that you probably won't even hardly see.
John?
Chief, the main thing is your communications with the police station back and forth, yes?
Yeah, so, well, yes and no. So it would also give them, it would help with our frequency, it would help with the police frequency, it would help with both frequencies by putting that up there. Our alternate dispatch site for both police and fire would be the new dispatch area at the fire station. So if they were to go down, so we'd still need, we'd want to be able to hit the tower at the police department to get out. Now, are there other ways to do that? There may be, and I think we can look at that by fiber and some other options that we may be possibly able to look at.
I was going to say, there's got to be fiber going down Main Street.
There is.
There's probably fiber. There's probably fiber to the curb that Verizon or what I call has.
Yeah, not that far down. So one of the intents and part of this project would be to complete the run from where we currently are, where our own town fiber ends, to the station. That would be part.
Yeah.
Okay. So with the chief saying that he's not in agreement to doing this at the cost, is everybody okay with taking this off the table?
Yes.
Yes.
And again, that goes back to, would I love it? Sure, I would love it. It's a great want. My needs are in programmatic, and that's where our needs are, and that's where I want to focus things.
Okay. So the agreement, everyone?
Yes.
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 Yeah.
All
Look at
right,
that. We already saved $1 million.
we're good. Okay, back to the shingles. I think there's a couple of questions there as far as the age of a shingle, what was spec'd out as far as what we're looking at. So we could deal with that next week instead. Are you
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah, I think that's fine. I think, you know, hopefully we'll have more information on all the material items to talk to you about the next time we meet. And just, you know, again, to summarize the HVAC items and the PV items, we'll talk to you more about when we have the life cycle cost assessment from the engineers. The energy code updates we can talk to you about when we have more energy code modeling done, so we know what we need. So I think we're good for right now.
Hey, that's great.
Tom's got his hand.
Tom,
Yes. I think we should include the folding doors at this time and not leave it as an open item, because doesn't make sense to put overhead doors for an extra 172,000 if we like the folding doors to begin with.
I agree with you.
Could I just speak to that
I
real quick?
concur.
So today, myself, the deputy, the captains were at a seminar in Worcester, and part of this seminar was a show, right? And there was a folding door company there. And I specifically asked them, is there a concern with folding doors in New England? Because that was one of the questions that came up from some different people. So I thought, I didn't think there was, but I wanted to check. And they said, no, as a matter of fact, and they showed me all these fire stations throughout New England and Massachusetts that are going forward with the folding doors because they're better. They open inside, they operate better, they're quicker, they're safer. They said, no, they're finding more and more companies are going, more and more departments are going with those. But I did ask that specifically to see if it was a problem in New England, and they said, no, it's not. So just to let everyone know.
So by agreement, we'll stay with the folding doors.
Agreed.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
And one last thing, I would recommend we keep the standing seam roof, even if you get better information about the asphalt, because if you're looking at life cycle costing for the building shell, putting an asphalt roof on is not a good idea.
and I'm okay.
Maintenance, difference of materials, flashing issues. If you notice in your neighborhoods, they're all streaking because the quality of the asphalt shingles are in decline. They're disintegrating faster. I wouldn't touch it.
Okay, I mean, does everybody want to take this up right now too?
I
Sure, why not?
agree.
Okay, anybody else?
I concur.
I also agree, working in a leaky building as we do now, I like the metal roofing.
Okay, so we can put that one to bed too,
Did you want to?
Great.
by
Good,
agreement?
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so the next item that we have is schematic design sign off.
Now, wait a minute, we still have, Amy, you have more slides, another slide.
Oh, there's more
Wow.
slide.
We're not done.
I like slide.
So we just wanted to update you on the schedule. We've talked about some of these things. We are going to the design review committee tomorrow morning. We have
Please come.
Please come.
So I do need to speak to that. I did check with the chair of design review. She indicated that it was that it was okay for myself and the chair and members of the design team. She did not want the other members of the committee there. She thought that was too cumbersome. So myself, I know Dawn's going to be here. The deputy probably won't, but it will be us and then the members of the design team.
I'm flattered to be excluded.
So go ahead. I apologize.
No, that's great. Okay, and so the zoning board we talked about, we're preparing the package. So the meeting isn't until March 26th, but the documents are hopefully going to be submitted by this Friday to the planner. And then we are moving ahead with your approval, we're going to move ahead with design development. We do have some meetings that we Janet, I don't know if you want to talk about this. Item number 4, we had a committee meeting next week.
Because we hope to have more design development progress at this point, but between all the meetings we've had, it's slowed down and we need to pick up steam, of course. But we have talked about a series of things that you want to hear about, make decisions on for next week. And we don't have a problem meeting, but it's not going to be a plan. You know, we might have some updates, but we're really trying to dig in, you know, kind of stop doing schematic design and begin DD. So that was why we wanted to know if we rescheduled or eliminated. I'm hearing that there might be
think we
things that we need
addressed-
to talk about. Yeah.
Janet, if
I was
may,
gonna
think
bring
we
it up.
addressed those things already.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
was gonna suggest not having it next week. I mean, I don't know how you guys are getting any work done if you have meetings
Well,
every week.
it
It's
has
an
been
issue.
it has been an issue, you know, despite,
Anyway.
you know, countless hours. So, you know, we
we'll
can
cancel
reschedule
March.
that one. Okay.
Let's reschedule it.
Okay, March 8th will cancel.
Okay, I'll come up with a new schedule. And then item number 5, of course, it's dependent on, you know, the next design review meeting. We have to have preliminary comments from the town planner. They're pretty benign and many of them will be picked up in the planning board. The bigger overall issues is what everybody knows about. And I don't, you know, we'll need some direction on how to pursue with that or move on with that. But I also don't see that necessarily happening in 2 weeks' time either. We'd have to have the drawings to them by next week and the reason, if you look at all the meetings, when there's a design review meeting scheduled, there's always a meeting with you guys beforehand for your approval. This is what we're presenting. Are you okay with this? So that is why that meeting number 9 was originally scheduled. So I don't know when we're going to go to the design review meeting next, but and this was put together a long time ago. So we're hoping to make big progress, but we're not sure that that's going to happen. So I think maybe we need to see what happens tomorrow and then speak on this one, maybe through some way you guys can communicate with that. We are going to the zoning board. That is done. It shouldn't, it's 3 issues, so hopefully they'll be able to roll easily. And then item number 8 is our first planning board meeting. And that is scheduled for April 16th, and drawings to do 3/18. Depending on what we hear tomorrow, retaining wall, the engineers had about a week less time than they really needed to do the drawings, but I know they're screaming along to get to that planning board meeting. And if for some reason, if something happens and it somehow grinds to a halt, we would just push it to the next meeting. And the next meeting after the April 16th would be May 7th. And so we were really trying to, keep it moving per recommendation of the planning board, the planning director. So that was that one. And then item 9 for 14 is the second zoning board meeting. It might not even be required. So I'm just pointing that out. And obviously, depending on what we hear at the planning board, the questions that we have to resolve, that could shift because of, the issues that come up. Because once that planning board submission goes in, that's really site civil work, kind of really tied up with it in a bow, with a bow there. So, we're all in agreement that a meeting next week is probably not required. I'll adjust this schedule to work towards that. So those are the things. Does anybody have any questions about why I highlighted those? Or
I don't have a question, but I have a comment, if I may.
Yeah.
I completely agree with, at least for now, scratching the design review meeting for March 14th. I think you guys and the committee have done a great job addressing a lot of their questions. I think we need to wait and see what happens tomorrow when we speak.
Okay.
as to
Okay.
whether or
So
not we'll need
we'll
any
make
additional-
that a to be determined date.
I think that makes
It
more sense.
maybe it won't even be required. Maybe we'll get approval.
Exactly. And on my schedule, I have, who knows? Yeah, so I
Yeah.
agree.
So, okay. And as Amy pointed out about the design review, they want to meet early in schematic design. But you don't have everything worked out, and some of the level of detail they're asking. Some of it is will sit with the planning board under, the civil submissions, stormwater reports, things like that, and others will just happen as we develop the design and make decisions. I think, Amy, going to the next slide, one of
If
the
you could-
issues remaining is we need to schedule an outdoor daylight meeting with you folks to look at brick and materials. You can't do that on Zoom. You can't do that at nighttime. You have to do that in the daytime. So I don't have a date. We have had multiple meetings with brick people. They've come out to Northborough. They've gone to buildings. They've compared brick. They've looked at materials. We've gone through 2 rounds of them. Going to have a 3rd round shortly of materials, searching for brickwork and contrasting materials, whatever. And before we put that in front of you, and the part of the design review comments is they do not have a selection of all these materials to review, that they get to see what we're proposing. I mean, we're saying red brick and we're saying this and that, but they want to have absolute. So, and we've explained that, you can't in public bid, you can't be absolute, but you'll be darn close.
That
So we
was my
try to
point.
explain that.
You're not gonna be able to have an absolute, Janet, because we don't.
Ever, not until the project is bid,
Unfortunately,
but we'll be close enough. We'll be close enough that we'll have what we call our basis of design chief.
Yep.
So, we'll have the brick that we want, and how it's comprised. I mean, on other towns where we have a mix of brick, like colors, we'll say it has to be 80% of this and 20% of, we give them percentages, and so we'll have some really good description of that brick, as well as basis design with a named product. Same with any contrasting materials. Same with the standing seam roof, et cetera, et cetera. We'll have those, but we have to give possibly at least three bidders, each company has to have like at least three, and then they can actually pick anyone they want beyond that as long as they meet the specifications. So unlike a private developer or something else, we cannot control that absolute. So I don't know how you guys, I want you guys to think about that. We're going to try to hone in on that because that is our design development, the detailing of the exterior wall sections, and that we'll need to have materials that we're, thinking of using done. And so we're going to have to schedule that sooner than later. And I want you to think about it. What's good days for people? What time of the day? Is it early morning? I don't know what people's work schedules are like. But it's coming, and you're going to have to schedule one daylight meeting. And it could be just about the finishes, not anything else, so.
Before we get to that, I think John had his hand up earlier, if I may, Madam
Yep.
Chair.
Yeah, Chief, any way you could get a recap of tomorrow's design review out to the group, even as preliminary, just, here's what was discussed and, action items or general feedback?
I will do the best I can.
That's fine.
Unfortunately, I have a week. My father-in-law passed away last week. I have a week to
Oh,
go
sorry.
tomorrow, and then
Sorry.
services are Friday. But I will do the best I can to get something to
That's
you
fine.
guys.
That's fine. Yeah.
It is a public meeting, John. You can follow it.
It'll be online. You can watch it.
I've got a conflict also tomorrow morning.
Mitch,
So it seems like we've moved on from discussing costs. At what point do we start to review some of the detail of the construction cost and seek input from Colliers on any value engineering opportunities? It's a critical part of the process.
Tim?
Well, I think at this point, it's a schematic design cost estimate, and certainly we can kind of share or highlight, what's driving some of the costs. But at this point, these alternates are really kind of what we want to focus on. And as we get into design development, I think that's when we would start really looking at other costs and maybe potential value engineering items. Really, at this point, it's a floor plan that's been laid out. It's a narrative on systems, mechanical systems. We're going to want to talk about mechanical systems and the pros and cons of each. And like I mentioned, there is one that has a much higher upfront cost, but delivers a better life cycle cost. And so those types of things we'll want to dig into, but that's really as the design gets a little bit further along.
Right, but that also locks us into discussions that are in more details than we could discuss now. I don't want to lose opportunity if there is anything that we can look at for reducing the cost at this stage.
We can take a look at the estimate that came in, and with that kind of an eye, and kind of maybe see if there's a handful of items that we think are worth discussing.
That'd be great. Yeah, I think it's necessary. Yeah, and we may come back and see that there's no value in making any changes. And I honestly, I hope that that's where we end up. But I think we owe the taxpayers the time to do that before we.
At this stage, it's really your costs are tied to square footage.
Yeah.
And that's been kind of hashed out. And so to talk about some of the detail, there's so much that's tied into that design and contingency that it's hard to get too deep into that at this level. But I understand your point. You don't want to lock yourself into something and not be able to make the change later. I totally get that.
Yeah. So
we'll take a look with that kind of lens and see what we can come up with.
And I also think the committee should see the level of detail of the cost estimate that we sort of loosely referred to earlier. I think we should get the whole thing.
Yep, that can be provided.
Thank you.
Okay, back to the outdoor daylight meeting. Can we get a sense of when people are available so that Janet might be able to come up with a schedule? I'm usually available before 3 o'clock during the day. Chief?
Hey, I work for you guys. I'm available all the time.
Tom?
Yep, mornings are great. after 9, preferably.
Okay, John,
I can do mornings.
Mitch,
I'm pretty flexible. I usually have a morning meeting between 9:45 and 10:15, but if necessary, I can even move that.
Diana,
Mornings are okay, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, but I have standing meetings on Mondays and Fridays.
okay, Captain,
Make a date, I'll be there.
okay. All right, I think I got everybody.
Is that good for you, Janet and Amy?
Yeah, that gives us something to work with, you know,
That's what I was
we'll,
trying to go
Yeah.
for.
you know, we'll come up with some dates and hopefully the weather will. One of the meetings I recently had, we had a thunderstorm in the middle of it. It was like, holy moly, well, you know, so you never know. But just as long as we have good daylight, makes a big huge difference. I know, I'm sure Diana and Tom know the difference between looking at brick inside a building and looking outside is not the same product. So yeah, okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right,
So-
we'll come up with a new schedule, try to get that schedule out to folks just to keep it on your schedules, on your big schedules. Okay, thank you for that one. Amy, I think we're done, right?
Yes.
Yes,
that
now
was the
we're
end of
done.
it. Yeah.
Now, design sign off?
So, yeah, Amy, Janet, you need a sign off on the schematic design, but that's just all time.
Formally, we're moving into design development. Maybe you should make a vote. You know, it's always better to say, yes, go ahead. Technically, some committees formally vote every step of the way. You guys have voted on a lot of things so far. Maybe that's worthwhile and, you know, like, but
Tom,
Does Tom have a question though?
I have a couple small items. I was going to recommend we add an overhang to the tower roof. So
pardon me, Tom, could you say that again?
we add an overhang, a roof overhang to the tower roof so we don't get streaking coming off the roof drainage directly onto the windows in the wall.
Okay.
And the other item is the bylaw requires a street number on the sign so the fire department can find the location.
I'm
That's
not worried
the
about ours, but
That's the Department of Redundancy Department?
Yes,
I
that's it.
think the police officers could get lost, but I think
That's it.
What about Amazon? Don't they need the number?
It's a bylaw.
Yeah,
we
the post,
need to make-
I think, doesn't the post office assign the number?
no, actually,
Assessor.
ours is done through assessing and then by agreement with the police chief, fire chief, and the
Okay.
and
Yeah.
the office. So
I think it's on the sign, but yeah, it will be on the sign, and it is on the sign. I think it's in lettering. Mark can confirm that, but the actual number is not.
I can
correct.
get that in motion where we can talk about, is it going to be 61 or 65 or somewhere in between?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll work on that.
We
Oh,
do have
65,
60.
I see it.
We
Yeah,
have
there-
65 there. It might
There
not
it
be the
is.
correct number, but we do
Yeah,
have
we
it
have
there.
6. Yeah, we show 65 West Main right now.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. What else, Tom?
That's all I have.
Okay.
Do I hear a motion to sign off on the design?
A question, if I could, before that is, does that prevent us from looking at any potential value engineering at this stage, as we were just talking about? I'd like to hear that from
No.
the architects.
No,
No.
I don't think that does.
no.
Dan
Okay.
said no, and Amy said no.
Mm-mm.
So do I hear? a
For what
motion?
it's worth, you can value engineering construction also.
Yeah.
So we have plenty of time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do I hear a motion? Anyone?
I move that we accept this schematic design.
One second.
Okay.
Okay. Dan?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Diana?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Mitch?
Aye.
Chief?
Yep.
Aye. Okay, so,
Okay.
all right, that brings us to public comment, limited to 3 minutes and must be related to an agenda item. Chief, you've got one written comment. Would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, so I gave it to you, didn't I?
Down here.
Hang on, I gotta find the thing I gave her. So we did receive an email. And the question was, I just watched the recording from the 214 building committee meeting. Oh, and before I read too much further, when I get these emails, we don't respond to them until we can have this meeting. So I just want to make sure people know that again. It's not, we're not ignoring you, but if you send us an email tonight, you're not going to get a response from us with an answer until we have a chance to discuss it. The building design looks to be coming along nicely. I was wondering where communications antennas will be mounted, as they are not depicted in a rendering, and we just discussed that amongst everyone. Will there be a separate comms tower, which there will not be? With the very nice windows atop the hose tower, it would seem to be, we don't want them on top of there as well. Will the hill directly behind a new fire station be issues for communications to the southern part of town? And the answer is no, that's not where we broadcast out of. So we actually go up off of the tower up on Church Street, so that will not cause any issues with the hill behind it. But I just wanted to make sure we address that. I think we've addressed all those except the one I just did. And I will send a response to this gentleman, and hopefully he's watching and gets the responses as well from here.
Okay, do we have anybody calling in?
So anyone in the meeting anyone of the attendees have any public comment? Just raise your little hand. Don't see anybody.
Don't see anyone. Okay, any other business that may legally come before the committee? Okay, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Madam Chair, a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
There are two motions to adjourn. Do I hear a second to the two motion?
I think Mitch seconded it.
Okay.
Yeah, take it for a second.
Yeah.
Okay, Dan,
Aye.
Tom,
Aye.
Neil? Nope, you
Neil
don't get to
doesn't
vote.
count. He's
You don't get to
just
vote.
there.
Diana,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Mitch,
Aye.
Chief,
All right.
and I. We'll see you all next week.
Thanks, guys.
See you tomorrow.
Not next week. We're not coming next week.
I'll see you guys tomorrow morning. And we'll
Tomorrow
talk.
morning. Okay. Tomorrow morning.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank
All
you.
right,
Good
thank
night.
you.
Good night.
Have a good night, everybody.